Hi, I'm Judith Leblein, and welcome to Conversations. With me today is Robin Moore. Robin is the author of many books, but in particular, The Hunt for Bin Laden, Task Force Dagger. You may be familiar with the work he did about the Green Beret as well. And Robin, welcome to Conversations.
Nice to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. The Hunt for Bin Laden, which continues today.
Yes, it does.
Began immediately on September 11th.
Began before then, but really September 11th, it cranked it up to no end.
When did the Special Forces get involved in the hunt in Afghanistan?
Right after after 11th of September, I was with the commanding general of the Special Forces 4 days before when he took off. He took office as commanding general, General Lambert, just 4 days before the 9/11. And so 4 days after he took over, he was at war. He had his first people over there in 10 days or 9 days.
How much intelligence existed on bin Laden and September 11th, in your opinion, and in his plans? And did we miss something?
We knew a lot about him because we were fighting for him for a long time. In fact, a lot of the people that are over there looking for him now and have been looking for him have been worked with him. One point, Billy Wall, who was a Special Forces guy who's now with the CIA, he saw bin Laden every day for a year when he was over there fighting the Russians. So he knows him pretty well, and he knows him very well, as a matter of fact. So we know him well, and we're still trying to find him, but I don't think we will.
So our hopes that he was killed in some of the earlier raids in Afghanistan, not so? Do you think the tapes we've been seeing and the audio and the videotapes we've been seeing, do you think they're recent? Do you think they're real?
I don't really think that we want to get him. I know that when I was over there in Afghanistan, I talked to some troops, a Special Forces team of 5 guys, and they actually had him in their sights at 1,500 meters and could have shot him if they wanted, but they called back to Tampa, Florida to ask if they could do it. By the time they got through and the answer was no, bin Laden had disappeared. They knew it was him because he was tall, and everybody around him was acting very towards him as though he was their leader. They could recognize him, but by the time that they got the answer no, don't shoot him, it was 15 minutes and he gotten away anyway.
Well, that's some pretty good resolve, because the way emotions were running, and I know that all of our forces felt it as if they were fighting not only for America, but in particular for the people lost on September 11th. Yes, that showed great resolve to even delay. Yeah,
well, they didn't want to kill him because they're afraid the American public, the non-people who don't like wars and all that sort of thing would say, well, the war's over now, let's stop it. Right now, there's a lot of war to go along, and even if bin Laden was dead, he would still have to fight the Al-Qaeda, his group. So if we did not, if we did kill him, then he would have been the subject of a lot of weeping and wailing in this country, and I think that there are a lot of people in this country who are not really for the war anyway. Probably a lot of the Muslim community is probably not for it, and they would have said, well, now he's dead, why don't you leave it alone? And
let's end it, it's done.
That's right, unless we didn't want that to happen, so I believe that that is one of the reasons why we have not got him yet, and I don't think we really want to get him.
So the call that you mentioned, that went from Afghanistan to Tampa. Tampa's the headquarters for Special Forces?
It was SOCOM, Special Operations Command. Special Forces is part of Special Operations. So there are other parts of it too. There's the SEALs. There's a lot of types of fighting people. We're part of SOCOM, Special Operations Command. And they call it Special Operations Command. And they got a word from a lawyer there, said, no, don't do it. It was a bad time of day, I guess it was nighttime. They couldn't get exactly what they wanted to get on the phone, so.
Well, there must have been some earlier orders from the Defense Department, perhaps.
I think so, because those guys were very surprised when they said they're having to get him right now. They didn't shoot him.
Now, how did you wind up so quickly in Afghanistan with this group of fighting forces? How did that come about so quickly?
I've always been very close to Special Forces. Ever since Vietnam, I had two tours there, and I've always been close to them. I just go to all their conventions. I just got back from a convention in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, just Monday. My wife and I were there, and we were with a lot of the people, my old friends, including General Lambert, who was the commanding general of the Special Forces. As I said, I was with him 4 days before 9/11 when he became the commanding general, so I was right with him when it happened. I said, I'd like to go over there, General, and he said, well, let's talk about it. And he let me go, and I was the only person that ever was allowed to go and get in with the people in the picture, the Hunt for Bin Laden, my book.
It's fascinating to see you there among the forces,
yeah.
among the people in Afghanistan. Pretty dire circumstances. That was pretty tough duty for you, Robin.
Yes, it was. I have a problem with the Parkinson now, and I sometimes lose my footing, not often, but sometimes. So I carried a cane with me at all times, but I didn't want him to think I needed the cane. I had a special cane made, which held 8 ounces of whiskey in it. And whenever I said, this is really you guys want to touch the can, screw the top off, pour a drink for him. So they thought I really just couldn't go without a drink for just 6 days at a time, so they liked that. They thought that was fun.
Great.
That's great. That's how I got away with carrying a cane. But as you can see in my picture with the guys in the book, I did have my cane with me at all times.
Well, you know, watching the war from home, there were many people that thought, well, you know, it was pretty antiseptic, direct strikes, all sorts of new ordnance. You know, we were marveling at some of the abilities. And down on the ground, it was the Special Forces guys, the Green Beret, who were actually targeting for that kind of work, yes?
100 Special Forces men won that war in 100 days. Really what the story of it was. Whereas the Russians lost thousands of people trying to take over. Of course, the Russians didn't have with them what we did. We had a group of people who could talk the language and who had been able to talk with the people, the various warlords. We got the warlords together fighting for us, and their troops fighting for us. We paid them all sometimes $500,000 so they could give money to their troops. That's really how we did it. We would get the Special Forces guys. They'd go out there. They'd target a tank or a group of the Taliban people, and then they would say, okay, they'd call in an airstrike and they'd just wipe them out. They were killing sometimes as many as 1,000 a day. So.
Do you know, it was such a ragtag bunch to be fighting. No defining uniforms, oftentimes old Soviet equipment. How did you tell one player from the other?
Well, you really couldn't. They could tell the Arabs. The Al-Qaeda were a lot different, and they're treated differently. When they capture one of their own, they just take their weapons and say, okay, go home or fight for us, but don't get lost. But they get the Al-Qaeda, they kill them right away. They didn't fool around with the Al-Qaeda, but that was an interesting thing that they could tell the difference among themselves, who was Al-Qaeda and who was Taliban.
Because in other wars, there are formal uniforms at least, or formal equipment that you could identify. But you know, 5 guys in the back of a truck with grenades that are rocket propelled. You know, how do you make those identifications? These people really know their stuff.
They certainly do, and they've proved it in that case. They would be there. They could see a mile and 2 away, and they could, with their special laser beams, they could beam it, a laser beam onto something they knew was the enemy, and then they called in the airstrike. The airstrike would drop precision bombs right on the target, so they never seldom missed. As a matter of fact, the problem we had there was that the bombing was sometimes too good. One bomb fell on our own people and killed 2 of us. That was the saddest thing of all, was to see that happen. But that happened too, but we were basically very good at picking out a target and lasering it and then making it possible to hit easily.
Now, you certainly know the Green Beret. You have lived with them. They're special to you. You're considered one of them. Have you known any other time in recent history where the Green Beret and their skills, the Special Forces, the Navy SEALs and their skills, were ever more efficient?
They've been more efficient, but they haven't been talked about so much. In Vietnam, they were very efficient. They're the most efficient fighters we had. And they would take 10 men, they'd have 500 or 1,000 CIDG, civil defense, irregular groups fighting for them. And they would teach them how to fight. They'd outfit them. Of course, half the time they'd be enemy occupied too. There'd be enemies right in there with them. In the movie The Green Berets with John Wayne, I made sure he showed that happened, that how you didn't even know who was on your side there, but we were pretty good in those days, and we were able to hold our own.
Not only a movie, but a song that became a popular hit on the radio.
The Green Berets, yeah.
Even during a time when many Americans were against that war. Maybe perhaps that's why we really didn't know the many sides of the Special Forces group. I think there's this misconception that these are highly trained killers with no sense of compassion, but you find that different.
They call them baby killers and all that sort of thing. That was what the peaceniks in this country called them. Actually, they were compelled to be with the people they were with, and they provided medical services always. And in Afghanistan, they took care of everybody, no matter who it was. When they were wounded, they took care of the Taliban as well. Now, the
Doing surgeries right there, out in the open.
Sure, right there. They were the best doctors ever. I'd rather have a Special Forces doctor than anybody else working on me. If I was even in this country, I have a friend who is a Special Forces doctor who helps me a great deal with my Parkinson. He gives me this right stuff that sometimes other people don't know. And
so they were these 100 Special Forces assigned there in Afghanistan during those 3 months, working with the Northern Alliance. Tell me about that relationship. Were they very highly respected by the Northern Alliance?
Yes, the Northern Alliance. Every major warlord had a Special Forces team. They all boasted about their teams, and they were very proud of them. They would even have their own men lie down in front of a Special Forces man if they were going to get into too much combat. But
That's amazing.
Yeah, they did. They did everything to save the guys because they knew that the Special Forces could save them. Also, the Special Forces had a lot of money, and they paid them well. I mean, there was a lot of money exchanged hands. Matter of fact, the inflation rate went up so high during the war that it still hasn't come down.
Well, it again shows you the professionalism of this group. As you said, even helping members of the Taliban who were injured.
Yes.
And an interesting part of your book saying how the medics would be sought out even to help relieve with a bad tooth because they were so unaccustomed to any medical assistance.
That's right. Anything they had, they'd go to the medics, and the medics would help with pull a tooth if they didn't do whatever they had to do. But that was one of the things that's always helped the Special Forces with their medics. And every 12-man team, there were 2 medics on each team. And in Vietnam, that was particularly useful. They also were in other wars. In Africa, they've been all over Africa. We don't hear about their African too much because that's very classified information, how they get into Africa. They were in Sierra Leone. They got rid of a diamond mine there that was being used by the communists to support themselves.
Now, the terrain in Afghanistan, very difficult.
Very difficult, yes.
Weather conditions, very difficult. There was some conversation here on the home front that even the Special Forces wouldn't be able to be successful in the winter months in Afghanistan. What are some of your observations?
Well, they won the war at the time when it was hardest to win it. They won the war between October and January. 2002, December was a terrible month there, but they won the war. They won it because they were out there with the people. They had the people fighting for them. They had everybody was for them. Because of medics and all that sort of thing, they could get the people to fight for them. Afghanistan usually went to war from April to June and July, August. They started quitting in September, so that was the normal fighting time. Whereas we had them just the opposite time and made them fight with us. Taught them. We gave them a lot of food they hadn't had. We gave them shoes. We gave them clothing.
I saw winter parkas and long johns.
Yeah, everything. We give one man. The 3 men would divide a 1-man ration of the American stuff. One man would take a jacket, another pair of pants, another shoes, and so they were well equipped for the first time in their lives, and they were fighting at a time when the Taliban were not accustomed to fight.
If you're just joining us, I'm having a wonderful conversation with Robin Moore. He is the author of The Hunt for Bin Laden and also The Green Beret. Robin, tell me something about the people that make up the Navy SEALs and the Green Beret, and the dedication, the strength, the courage, does that come from within? Is that trained? I mean, how do you get this elite fighting force?
They had to be there to begin with. They had to be in the mode to begin with. More people in the Special Forces have told me they read my book, the Green Berets, and joined up, and they were the ones that were the best because they had a predilection towards being what they wanted to be, what we wanted them to be, and that was why they were so good. They'd have a training course of 100 men would go through a training course, and maybe 5 would, 6, 8, maybe 10 would succeed. But everybody who was in that course wanted to succeed, and sometimes 15 would succeed. In my course, I think 25 they succeeded. I was lucky to want to be one of them.
Well, there are always those people that want to be the very best in their profession.
That's right.
That's part of it, yes?
Surely, and these guys are the best, and they try to be the best.
But, you know, I can't help but think about the conditions.
Yes, they were there.
The technical requirements. The technology is just unbelievable that they have to be accustomed to. And then going into a country that, from our observations here in the States, caves, desert, snow, unbearable weather conditions, all of that, and they're skilled in every one of those areas.
Well, it's not to do with the political process in this country too. After almost a day that George Bush Jr. came in, everybody turned towards him, his feelings for the Army. He immediately put the Special Forces back on their feet. They had been kicked around a lot because they were so good that the conventional Army didn't like them very much. They tried to keep them
seen as prima donnas.
Yeah, that's right. But George Bush came in, and that's why the political process is so important right today. That's why I'm here today, because I think that Dick Pleckner should be elected. He's a type of person that knows what we've got to face, and if we didn't have this, we don't have this background. All through the whole political process, from Washington down to the local politicians, it's got to be behind us, or we're not going to win that war. We're winning now because of them. They're behind us. The commanding general of the Special Forces told me just last week. He said, "I just got $1.5 million worth of equipment for my people, which I never could get before, because the politicians realize it, and the congressmen, and they realize it."
Well, don't you think there's also a newfound spirit of support for the military, not only since Afghanistan, but certainly since Iraq, and the stories and the embedded journalists that we've actually seen and understand more of the sacrifice, and we've seen both sides. We've seen the soldier, and we've seen the compassionate side.
That's true.
I think that has helped, as well as the political courage of leadership.
The political courage of leadership is very important, but the guys themselves are the top-notch people. They all want to be what they are. They fight to get there, and they like to be there. I just spent the last week with 7 or 8 guys just come back from Baghdad. They told me a lot of stories. They all said the same thing. If we don't have the political background here to help us, we can't win this war. We all knew from our letters from home that our congressmen were behind us, everybody was behind us. And that is really the most important thing they have to know, because they didn't have that before. They didn't have that, we didn't have that in Vietnam.
Now, Robin, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that the Special Forces had Osama bin Laden in their sights and were told, don't go for it. Do you feel that they, in a sense, are frustrated?
They are sometimes, yes, but they understand. They understand why. That's why if they hadn't understood, they wouldn't have called in. They would have shot him right away. But they did take the trouble to, because they understood the reason for being there, and they understood the reason that the people at home were against them being there, because they didn't like wars at home, and so they called in.
Well, in the world community too, no matter how disastrous, how treacherous, how awful all of us felt on September 11th, and the losses, especially here locally in New York, New Jersey, the world still was watching how we treat others.
Yes, they did. And I think that one of the greatest things that happened was, it reminded me of Pearl Harbor, when Yamamoto, he led the Japanese Air Force in, and they bombed Pearl Harbor. But Yamamoto said, well, we've now awakened the sleeping giant. What are we going to do? Of course, Yamamoto had been to Harvard. He knew this country very well. Yamamoto knew that they were going to, once they bombed them, they were dead. He knew they couldn't win the war right from the beginning, and he was killed by his own people, put in an airplane that we could shoot down nicely. But this is the sort of thing that happens. What has happened with bin Laden is that he made a mistake, I think. If he really wanted to do what he wanted to do, he should have waited 2 more years and then waited to soften up more. We were just at a position where we had a new general in charge of special forces. He didn't know whether he was going to be able to get there, get the Washington support or not. But when they did that, they absolutely woke up the sleeping giant.
You know, you tell such interesting stories in the book as well of the personal side of these very special people, and of many a wife who actually was urging commanders to please deploy my husband because he's going crazy here at home. He wants to be there.
I know. When I was at Fort Campbell several times, I was there right after the war was over. And I met some of those women who said the same thing, that my husband just wanted to get there so much he couldn't get there. But the ones that were stayed back were very, very brave people themselves, and they had a terrible fight themselves. They had to keep their wives happy. They had to keep the family happy. They had to keep everything going. And it was tough to be home. It was much easier to be, not easier, but it was better to be.
Now you mentioned about getting the proper funding and having political courage to support the military, but you know there are great concerns about our veterans once they come home, and once they are no longer in the military, and you know, hopefully we see more support in that way. Too many forgotten soldiers in old soldiers' homes around this country.
That's true. I know that, but again, that's why I say Richard Pleckner is a guy that I hope they'll. That's why I'm here, because I really like to see him get elected, because he is typical of the guy that will keep this war going as long as it has to be going, but not any longer than it has to be.
You're talking about a local candidate.
Yes, a local candidate, Richard Pleckner, who's
a good friend of yours as well.
Good friend for many years. He's
and
running,
here in the 18th district.
I'd like to see, if he gets elected in the 18th district, I think it'll make a difference between, it'll happen all over the United States. Suddenly people pick up and they say, well, here's one guy getting elected who was a soldier, who was a judge prior to that, and he's a guy that he's a man that will see that we get things done right.
Well, let me ask you this. Now we still are getting mixed messages out of Iraq, whether or not Saddam Hussein is still alive, whether his sons are still alive. In your opinion, being so close to groups like the Green Beret, the Navy SEALs that work with intelligence, do you believe Saddam Hussein is alive in Iraq?
I think he's alive. I don't think he's very much alive. I think he's been wounded. I think that they're keeping him. I don't think he's really dead. If he was dead, I think they would have just let his body be seen or something. But I think he's alive, and he's just barely alive. Probably isn't very much he can do. I don't think he's really been. He has not been the one that's been photographed out there, obviously.
Do you believe in the connection between Iraq and Al Qaeda?
Oh, certainly, yes, very much so. It was the Al Qaeda people were being supported by Iraq directly. They're getting money. They're getting a lot of help from the Iraqis, and they were able to go and use Iraq as a headquarters for their property, for what they were doing in other countries in the Middle East. So yes, they're very much a part of it.
The intelligence that we had going into Iraq and the initial bombing, the night we all found out that indeed we were there, was that intelligence gathered both by the CIA and Special Forces?
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, I was at Fort Bragg at 5 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock the war started. And the commanding general, General Lumber, said, well, at 8:15 when the war is going to start, you'll see. At 8:15 I was on my way to Fort Campbell, so I didn't, I got there, and sure enough, just when he told me 8:15 it started, so he knew that they were going to bomb, they were going to drop a bomb on Saddam himself at that time, and that's when the war started. The war started actually several days earlier than they expected it to start. They had to start it sooner because they knew that they had the intelligence to know that at one point they could hit Saddam and drop a bomb on him, and they dropped the biggest bomb they had, the mother of all bombs, on him.
It was quite a scene, the shock and awe. Yes. Tell me, do you think that the Bush administration has received adequate intelligence? We have not yet found the weapons of mass destruction. Are we getting a different interpretation of that intelligence? What's your take on that, Robin?
Well, I believe that Bush has been getting great intelligence. They know that there was, they knew that it was there. They knew there was all kinds of atomic weapons there. They knew that there was a gas there. They knew there was a biological capability was there. And they've been finding it little by little, but it hasn't been all there because somebody straightened it out. Somebody must have said to them, look, somebody with some sense must have said, look, Saddam, you better get this out of the way because you're going to be attacked. And Saddam never really believed they were going to attack us, that we were going to attack him. But so I believe it is there. I believe we'll find it. I think we'll find a lot more. What we're finding is a tremendous capability to destroy America if they want to, with just what we found so far: the ricin gas, the ricin poison, all the equipment they had to do it. They had right there, and they found it. They found caches of it. And they're still finding it. I think they'll find a lot of stuff as they go along. They took it out and buried it. They had 10 years to bury it and then get up with pieces of it when they're ready to use it.
Now, Robin, what's next for you? Is there another book about the Special Forces?
Well, yeah, I've just got back from, as I say, from Carlisle War College, where I was at this convention, and my wife Mariaga and I were there, and she talked to them too. She got to know she knows General Lambert very well, as do I. And so Lambert and Mariaga and I were pretty friendly, and he told me that I could go. He said I could go next week if I wanted to. I think he was kidding about that. He's going next week. He said, if you really want to go there, I'll get you over there, and you can see the people, talk to them just as we did in Bin Laden's time, and so.
Well, it's a fascinating book, The Hunt for Bin Laden, Task Force Dagger, and it really further reinforces my idea of the Special Forces and the young men and women that we have in our military today, and I think it's a great service to them as well.
Picture section is very good. Random House spent a lot of money on that picture section. It's all color, and there are great pictures there of the war. Most of them were secret, were not taken with the permission of the U.S. Most of them were just taken, and we got some very good pictures, all in color, beautiful pictures.
Well, I think it's important for the American public to know the stories, and you certainly have brought them back to us, and we thank you for joining us. There's nothing like a good conversation. You can get the book at your library or local bookstores. It's The Hunt for Bin Laden. Thank you so much, Robin.
Good to be here with you.